Gary, it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation here today.
I am as well. So let's just jump right into it. Would you please introduce yourself and your organization?
Sure. My name is Gary Jones. I'm Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety Affairs at Printing United Alliance. Printing United Alliance is an association for as the name implies, the printing industry. And so our members, which obviously join our association, are in the term we use are verticals, but there are many different verticals in the printing industry. So you can think of things such as books, magazines, catalogs, through apparel decoration. We're printing on hoodies and T-shirts. We have members that print industrial circuits like the keypad on your microwave. Any sign that you see, labels, packaging, banners, things that anything that really gets printed, including things that you don't normally think about, which are carpeting, for example. We have members that print on carpeting. So it's a very wide. It's as I like to explain to people, it's probably the largest industry you've never heard of, and it's the printing industry. And you interact with print every day of your life and don't even realize it. So it's so ubiquitous.
So, next question. Why do you care about sustainability, both from a personal perspective as well as your role in Printing United?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking that through, and I would say probably my primary motivator for sustainability is that I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I've always been involved, even when I was little, with camping, with fishing, with enjoying the outdoors, and really taking in the beauty of what our country has. And then you think about it, we only have one planet. And so I'm driven to try and protect and preserve and actually expand, our natural resources. Really, protection of natural resources is, I would say, from a personal perspective, is probably the largest motivator for me. In terms of Printing United Alliance, what's interesting is, of course, we know sustainability has evolved from a concept to an idea to really, in many instances, a full-blown, full-time situation for a lot of companies. And our members are in the supply chain. And so sometimes they're, a primary supplier, secondary, tertiary, but printing is always in somebody's supply chain. And as you know, the supply chain, this has become critically important depending upon the market that you're in. And so our members get these types of questions, requests on a routine basis depending upon the market they're in, like obviously packaging is red hot. Point of purchase display is a red hot area for sustainability. Those companies that are servicing those markets, they get those questions and requests from their customers a lot more frequently than, say, some of our other members. But collectively across the board, it is something that is high interest for our members. And so, as the role that I play, we help them in their sustainability journey.
So let's talk a little bit about the role that you play. I know that you spent a lot of your time on the EH&S stuff. And could you maybe explain how, from an EH&S perspective, this dovetails with this move towards sustainability and sustainability reporting?
Well, what's interesting about EHS and sustainability is that I don't see them as being mutually exclusive. I think they're mutually inclusive. And the reason why I say that is traditionally, uh, environmental issues we focus on compliance requirements, say, for example, and reducing hazardous waste or generating hazardous waste, reducing hazardous waste. Well, that's what sustainability is about. So I don't see them being mutually exclusive. I think that they complement each other. Pollution prevention for probably 15, 20 years was probably one of the hottest issues in environmental, and then sustainability kind of came on, and now they complement each other. So reducing pollution is the same as sustainability. If we're reducing the burden on our environment, we're preserving natural resources. I mean, that's the heart and soul of a lot of what sustainability represents. And then we can't forget about people. So, it's people, planet, profit is one way to look at sustainability. Well, the safety aspect fits nicely in with that because in the printing industry, we need to make sure that we're protecting our employees. We're keeping them safe, and it does seem like a corny term, but you want them to go home the same way that they came into the building at the beginning of the day when they go home to meet their families. And so safety is critically important because in essence, you're basically preserving, you want to preserve your human capital, if that's the way to look at it, and keeping your employees safe is important. And printing is dominated by family businesses. Over 80% of the industry has 20 employees or less. A lot of printing operations started in somebody's garage or somebody's basement. They have a lot of family members working in their business. And of course, they want to protect their family as well. So I see the two being extremely complementary to each other. I don't see them being really separate concepts. Maybe extensions, to some extent, but they're very well suited to be together.
What kind of advice would you have for companies who are just starting on their sustainability journey?
Well, that's a good question, and that's one that we get a lot. Where do I start? Personally, I say start small. I think you start with small gains, small wins, and then you're able to show and demonstrate the value of what that does for your organization and your company. And you have to engage the workforce. As I said, it can't be like another flavor of the month type thing. You actually have to be serious about it. You have to embrace sustainability. And what's interesting is your most powerful allies are your employees, in my opinion, because your employees are doing the job. They can think of better ways to do the job. They can provide suggestions on ways to become more efficient, reduce waste, increase your turnaround, which is really what you're in business for. You're in business, obviously, to keep the doors open. You have to have profits. And I get that question, what's of people playing a profit, which one's the most important? And I say they're all equally important. You can't have one without the other. You can't identify one. But to me, I think you start small. You start with things that people can see, and then you report. You have to communicate. And ultimately, you can grow your program. Some of the best programs I've seen, we walked into a facility, they had dashboards. They had a lot of dashboards up about their waste, their recycling goals, their VOC emission reductions. They had a center where they had people that offered suggestions, and they had a bell. It was in the middle of the production room floor. And if someone had a suggestion on to improve their operation or whatever, they would make that suggestion, they would ring a bell, and then once a week, management would take all the suggestions, they would consider them, and they would implement the ones that made a lot of sense, and then they would celebrate the fact that they did that. When you start doing that with your workforce, you'll start to see the positive benefits. You'll get momentum that you would never have thought that could have come from a sustainability type program. So I say start small. I mean, one of our members who is really a leader in this area, they started with coffee cups. So they started with disposable coffee cups. The owner came in one day and said, "We're getting rid of all these coffee cups and we're going to go to reusable." And we bought everybody a coffee cup. And that's what started their program. And now he's recognized worldwide as being a leader in the apparel decoration community for sustainability. And you start small. That's what I always stress to folks.
All started with a cup of coffee. I like that.
Yep.
So, last question for you. Um, any general thoughts outside of the questions that I've asked that you'd like to share?
Yeah, Steve, I think the other, probably getting back to the last question, in my opinion, I think the most important thing that a company can do with sustainability is to start with metrics. Because if you're going to tell your sustainability story, you need to be able to put some numbers on it. You need to be able to basically say, we had a project. We wanted to reduce our energy consumption by 5%. So unless you know what your energy consumption is from a baseline, how do you know how much progress you've made? So to me, the central component of any sustainability program is metrics, because metrics provide you the information that you need to communicate to your stakeholders. And you have to be credible. Any sustainability program, you need to have credibility with it. And having metrics gives you credibility to your sustainability program. That I think is essential to moving forward. And yes, you can launch your sustainability programs, but you really need your metrics. You need to think about, what do I want to track? How am I going to track those metrics? How am I going to be able to tell my story? Because ultimately, you're going to have people who are going to ask you that, and that's what we're seeing. You asked about reporting, the sophistication of what customers are asking now. In some instances, they want to know what your carbon emissions are. They want to know what you're doing. What are your levels? What are you doing to reduce them? Because they need that for their own reporting. And so that's pretty intricate in terms of those metrics. But I think personally, I would say you got to have metrics. You got to have a metrics program. You need to know how much water, how much waste, how much electricity, what other natural resources you're consuming. What's your injury and illness rate? That's important because that's your health and safety aspects of it. So to me, metrics is really where you really want to, when you launch your program, you got to be launching it with metrics in mind.
Gary, you're awesome. Thank you very much for your time. It is greatly appreciated.